Welcome to Creative Immigration Law, where we explore fresh perspectives and innovative frameworks to reimagine the way we think about immigration. Today, we're diving into the philosophy of Immanuel Kant, a thinker who challenges us to approach immigration not just as a political issue, but as a moral opportunity. So let's get creative and discover how we can build a better, more compassionate world together. What does it mean to belong? What obligations do we have to those who arrive at our borders seeking safety or opportunity? And how do we balance compassion for the stranger with the sovereignty and stability of our nations? These questions have plagued humanity for centuries, yet they feel particularly urgent in today's world as global migration challenges our moral and political boundaries. 2 centuries ago, Immanuel Kant wrestled with these very dilemmas. In his quest for a philosophy that could guide humanity toward perpetual peace, Kant posed profound questions. Can we build a world where borders don't sever our moral obligations? How do we reconcile the rights of individuals with the rights of states? And is it possible to create policies that are not just pragmatic, but fundamentally just? Kant's answers, rooted in his concepts of universal hospitality, the categorical imperative, and the vision of a cosmopolitan community, resonate deeply with today's immigration crises. What does it mean, Kant asks, to treat every person not as a means to an end, but as an end in themselves? What kind of global order would emerge if nations prioritize justice over fear? And how should we respond to the suffering of migrants and refugees in a world that is increasingly interconnected but divided by walls? These are the questions we'll explore today. We'll see how Kant's timeless principles provide a framework for ethical immigration policies, challenge the inequities of the modern world, and inspire us to think beyond borders. Kant doesn't offer easy answers, but he compels us to confront the hard truths, that the fate of the stranger is inseparably tied to our own humanity, and that the decisions we make today will shape the moral fabric of the world to come. Let us delve into his ideas and see how they can help us face one of the greatest moral and political challenges of our time. Immanuel Kant, in his essay Perpetual Peace, a Philosophical Sketch, introduces a radical concept, the universal right to hospitality. He writes, "The law of world citizenship shall be limited to conditions of universal hospitality." But what does Kant mean by hospitality? He's not talking about extravagant welcomes or unrestricted immigration. Instead, Kant defines hospitality as the right of a person to not be treated as an enemy upon arriving in another country, so long as they act peacefully. It's a simple yet profound principle. No one should be turned away if doing so would cause harm. Now think about the millions of refugees today, people fleeing war, persecution, and environmental disaster. For them, Kant's principle of hospitality isn't a philosophical abstraction. It's a matter of life and death. To turn them away is to deny their humanity and the interconnectedness we all share. And yet, Kant does not naively disregard the complexities of governance. He recognizes that this right to hospitality is not a right to permanent settlement. Sovereign states maintain their authority to regulate who may stay and under what conditions. This careful balance between moral obligation and practical autonomy is critical. Let me offer you an example. Imagine a refugee family fleeing war in their homeland, arriving at the border of a prosperous nation. According to Kant, the host nation has a duty to grant them temporary refuge. This duty stems not from convenience or economic benefit, but from a shared humanity that binds us together. However, the state is not required to offer permanent residence without due process and deliberation. This distinction reflects Kant's nuanced approach. Morality obliges us to help those in urgent need, but it also respects the sovereignty and stability of nations. Yet in many parts of the world today, this principle of hospitality is blatantly violated. Refugees are criminalized, detained, and even returned to places where their lives are at risk. These actions contradict Kant's moral imperative, which requires that we offer assistance, even when it's inconvenient or difficult. The implications for our immigration policies are profound. A system that outright rejects asylum seekers, or one that prioritizes economic or political expediency over human lives, is fundamentally at odds with Kant's vision. It's not just about national interest, it's about moral responsibility. Kant calls on us to rise above fear and self-interest and embrace the higher ideals of justice and compassion. As we consider the challenges of modern immigration, we must ask ourselves, how can we honor the principle of hospitality while maintaining the integrity of our borders? How can we create policies that reflect our shared humanity rather than our divisions? And how can we ensure that no one is treated as an enemy simply for seeking refuge? Kant doesn't give us easy answers, but he offers a moral compass, a reminder that in an interconnected world, what happens to one affects us all. Hospitality isn't just a matter of ethics. It's a cornerstone of global peace and cooperation. What if every immigration policy in the world were applied universally? Would the principles behind those policies lead to a harmonious global order? Or would they fracture the world into chaos and hostility? This is the question at the heart of Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative. He urges us to act only according to that maxim whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. In other words, policies must be fair, just, and capable of being universally applied without contradiction. Let's put this to the test. Consider a policy that denies asylum to refugees based on economic strain or political convenience. If every nation adopted this policy, what would happen to the millions fleeing persecution, war, or climate disasters? The answer is stark. The world would become a place where no one could find refuge. The principle of mutual aid, essential to both survival and peace, would collapse. Such a policy cannot be universalized without undermining the very foundations of humanity's coexistence. Now, think of an alternative. Policies that ensure fair and compassionate treatment for those seeking refuge, while balancing the practical realities of governance. These policies, designed to respect the dignity of every individual, are far more aligned with the categorical imperative. They can be universalized because they reflect a commitment to justice and mutual responsibility, fostering a global order rooted in cooperation rather than conflict. Kant's categorical imperative also demands that we treat every person as an end in themselves, never merely as a means to an end. Immigrants must not be reduced to economic units, political pawns, or security risks. They are individuals with inherent worth, deserving of respect and protection. Yet in many cases, this principle is flagrantly ignored. Migrants are exploited for labor, stripped of their rights, and dehumanized in political rhetoric. Such actions not only violate their dignity, but also degrade the moral fabric of the societies that permit them. Let me illustrate this with a hypothetical scenario. Imagine a country that accepts immigrants solely for their economic utility, granting entry only to those who can immediately contribute to its workforce. While this may seem pragmatic, it reduces human beings to commodities valued only for their output. Now consider the reverse, a policy that prioritizes the most vulnerable, offering refuge to those who have lost everything. This policy respects individuals as ends in themselves, recognizing their intrinsic worth regardless of their immediate utility. The choices we make in shaping immigration policies speak volumes about our values. Do we view migrants as burdens or as fellow human beings deserving of dignity? Are our policies guided by fear and self-interest or by justice and compassion? Kant challenges us to answer these questions not with expedient compromises, but with ethical clarity. As nations navigate the complexities of immigration, the categorical imperative serves as a powerful moral guide. It reminds us that our policies must not only work in the here and now, but also stand the test of universality. They must contribute to a world where every person, regardless of their origin, is treated with respect and fairness. The challenge is daunting, but the stakes could not be higher. When we fail to apply this principle, we risk creating a fragmented and hostile global order. But when we succeed, we lay the foundation for a future of peace, cooperation, and shared humanity. What gives each of us the right to pursue a better life? Is it a privilege granted by governments, or does it stem from something deeper, something inherent to our humanity? Immanuel Kant answers this question with a resounding affirmation of moral autonomy. In The Doctrine of Right, he writes, "Freedom is the only original right belonging to every human being by virtue of his humanity." This idea, the right to live free from coercion and to make choices consistent with one's dignity, is central to Kant's philosophy. And it's profoundly relevant to how we view the rights of immigrants today. When people migrate, they are exercising this fundamental right. They are seeking freedom from violence, poverty, and oppression, and pursuing the opportunity to live lives of dignity and self-determination. Yet all too often their autonomy is stripped away. Migrants are denied entry, detained in inhumane conditions, or subjected to exploitation that reduces them to mere tools of economic convenience. These practices, Kant would argue, violate the very essence of their humanity. Let's consider an example. Imagine a migrant worker who leaves their home country to escape dire poverty, only to find themselves trapped in a system that exploits their labor without offering legal protections or a pathway to citizenship. They may work long hours for meager wages, all while living in fear of deportation. This is not freedom, it's coercion. It treats the individual as a means to an end, violating the Kantian principle that every person must be treated as an end in themselves. Contrast this with policies that protect migrant workers' rights, ensuring fair wages, safe working conditions, and opportunities to fully integrate into society. These policies honor the autonomy of individuals, recognizing their agency and humanity. They transform migration from an exploitative transaction into a mutual exchange of opportunity and contribution. Kant's commitment to moral autonomy also challenges us to think about the broader systems that force people to migrate in the first place. Poverty, inequality, conflict, and environmental crises are not just unfortunate realities. They are injustices that undermine human freedom on a global scale. For Kant, these conditions are fundamentally at odds with the idea of perpetual peace, a world order based on justice, cooperation, and respect for human dignity. Addressing the rights of immigrants, then, is not just about what happens at our borders. It's about addressing the root causes of migration. It's about building a world where every individual has the opportunity to thrive in their homeland if they so choose, and where migration is an expression of freedom rather than a desperate escape from suffering. The implications for policy are clear. States must do more than simply manage migration flows. They must ensure that their policies respect and protect the autonomy of migrants. This means providing legal pathways to migration, protecting workers' rights, and addressing the systemic injustices that drive displacement. Kant's philosophy challenges us to reframe how we view immigrants, not as outsiders or burdens, but as individuals exercising their fundamental rights. Their pursuit of a better life is not an affront to national sovereignty. It's a testament to the shared human desire for freedom and dignity. And respecting that pursuit is not merely a moral option, it's a moral obligation. What happens when the rights of individuals come into conflict with the priorities of nations? Can we balance the moral obligations we have to others with the practical needs of sovereign states? Immanuel Kant faced these questions head-on, envisioning a world where national interests and universal justice coexist. In Perpetual Peace, he writes, "The peoples of the earth have entered in varying degrees into a universal community, and it has developed to the point where a violation of rights in one place on the earth is felt everywhere." Kant's words reflect a profound truth. We are not isolated nations, but interconnected members of a global community. The challenges of one country, whether war, poverty, or environmental disaster, inevitably ripple across borders. Immigration is perhaps the clearest example of this interconnectedness. When people are forced to flee their homes, their suffering is not contained within one nation. It becomes a shared responsibility. Yet, Kant also acknowledges the importance of national sovereignty. He recognizes that states have a duty to maintain order and stability, and that they cannot be expected to bear unlimited burdens. This balance between cosmopolitan unity and national self-interest is at the heart of Kant's philosophy, and it offers a crucial framework for addressing modern immigration crises. Let's consider a real-world scenario. Imagine a nation faced with an influx of refugees fleeing a neighboring conflict. On one hand, the nation has a moral duty to provide shelter in line with Kant's principle of universal hospitality. On the other hand, it must consider the strain on its resources, infrastructure, and social cohesion. Kant would argue that while the state's autonomy must be respected, it cannot justify total inaction. A refusal to contribute to a global solution undermines the very idea of a shared human community. Kant challenges us to think beyond zero-sum approaches. Instead of framing immigration as a conflict between us and them, he invites us to view it as a collective problem requiring collective solutions. This might mean creating international agreements to distribute responsibility for refugees equitably, investing in the stabilization of conflict zones, or addressing climate change as a root cause of displacement. Kant's cosmopolitan vision doesn't erase national borders. It reimagines them as points of connection rather than division. Critics might argue that this vision is idealistic, that nations must prioritize their own citizens over the needs of others. But Kant offers a counterpoint. The pursuit of national self-interest, when unchecked, ultimately leads to insecurity and conflict. A world where every nation prioritizes only itself is a world of perpetual rivalry and distrust. By contrast, a world governed by justice and cooperation creates the conditions for lasting peace and prosperity. This balance between protecting sovereignty and honoring universal obligations is not easy to achieve. It requires difficult choices, compromises, and a willingness to look beyond short-term gains. But Kant's philosophy reminds us that these efforts are necessary. The interconnectedness of humanity is not a threat. It is an opportunity to build a more just and compassionate world. As we grapple with the realities of modern immigration, Kant's words resonate deeply. He writes, "A violation of rights on one place of the earth is felt everywhere." This is not just a statement of interconnectedness, it is a call to action. It reminds us that in addressing the challenges of immigration, we are not merely helping others, we are upholding the moral unity of humankind, which binds us all together. Kant's vision of a just and peaceful world is bold, inspiring, and, let's be honest, difficult to implement. He was not naive about the complexities of governance. In Perpetual Peace, he acknowledges that while moral principles guide us, practical considerations shape how we act. Nations, he writes, retain the right to control who settles within their borders. Yet even this practical concession does not negate the moral obligations we owe to one another as members of a shared human community. So, how do we reconcile Kant's ideals with the realities of the modern world? The answer lies in crafting policies that balance morality with pragmatism, policies that reflect our shared humanity without ignoring the constraints of governance. This is not easy work. It requires collaboration, compromise, and courage. First, nations must ensure that their immigration policies align with Kant's principle of universal hospitality. This means offering refuge to those in immediate danger and treating immigrants with dignity, regardless of their origin or status. No one should face dehumanization or harm simply because they sought a better life. Second, states must work together to address the root causes of migration. War, poverty, and climate change are not just crises for individual nations, they are global challenges that demand global solutions. Investing in stability, development, and environmental resilience is not charity. It's a moral imperative and a strategic necessity for a peaceful world. Third, we must shift the narrative around immigration. Too often, immigrants are portrayed as threats or burdens. But Kant's philosophy reminds us that they are individuals with rights, dignity, and autonomy. When we treat them as ends in themselves rather than as means to an end, we not only honor their humanity, we strengthen our own. Kant's ideas may seem idealistic, but they are also deeply pragmatic. His emphasis on justice, cooperation, and shared responsibility offers a framework for addressing immigration that is not only ethical, but sustainable. He challenges us to look beyond fear and self-interest and to envision a world where borders do not divide us, but connect us. As we face the complexities of modern immigration, we must ask ourselves, what kind of world do we want to create? Do we want a world governed by suspicion, division, and self-interest? Or do we want a world that embodies Kant's vision of perpetual peace? A world built on justice, compassion, and the recognition that our fates are intertwined. The path forward is not easy, but it is clear. Kant's teachings remind us that immigration is not just a problem to be managed. It is an opportunity to reaffirm our shared humanity. It is a test of our moral courage and our commitment to building a better future, not just for some, but for all. Let us rise to this challenge, guided by Kant's vision and inspired by the belief that together we can create a world that honors both the rights of nations and the dignity of every individual. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Kant's vision of immigration and humanity. If his ideas inspired you to think differently about immigration, we invite you to continue exploring with us. Subscribe to Creative Immigration Law for more thought-provoking content, where we bring together philosophy, creativity, and global issues to inspire change. As Kant might say, let's act in ways we can will to become universal laws, and maybe, just maybe, help shape a more just and connected world. See you next time.